Coming up on Currently, the future of Manitou Transit, a look at the tradition of the Cedar Polka Fest, DDA updates and 14th Street construction, and Beth Milligan shares details about a local woman who, in an effort to influence policy change and highlight victims, has turned her own harrowing story of surviving stalking and an assault into a 3-part docuseries that premiered on Hulu this week. That's all ahead on Currently. Welcome to Currently, where we discuss some of the top local stories directly from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Christal Frost. This podcast was recorded on Wednesday, August 20th. The Tigers are 76-53, leading the AL Central. That said, things may change by the time you're watching or listening. And support for Currently comes from Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. It's home fashion elevated. And from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you're not just choosing a bank. You are choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community. Visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. Support also comes from the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City. It's a chill hangout with a full bar in a low-key setting. Welcome Beth Milligan from Traverse City Ticker and Jakob Wheeler from Glen Arbor Sun. Hi.
Hi.
Friends, we're back. How is everyone?
Great. Jakob was like an early guest.
Yeah, a few times.
It's nice to have him back.
On, and now
fun to be back. Thank you.
Here we are, 29 episodes in. We feel like old people.
We're growing up.
29 episodes old. Next week, we're going to be 30, and then, we're going to start to see our hairline receding. And
got to refinance the mortgage and just all the things you do.
Yeah, the things you do as you get older. I don't think I was doing that stuff at 30. I was a late bloomer when it came to that, for sure. We are going to get right into it because we have, as you all know, a lot to share today. And I want to start with you, Jakob. An incredible story in the Glen Arbor Sun that really details the future of Manitou Island Transit. So before we get into the story, why don't we do a little bit of maybe history about what Manitou Island Transit is and, what it offers, and then we can get into what's at stake.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a storied company based in Leland Fishtown, run by the now the Grosvenor Munoz family. It's been operating for 108 years, since 1917, 4 generations. They've been the ferry service which has taken, in recent decades, visitors to the North and South Manitou Islands, which are now part of the Sleeping Bear National Lakeshore and have been for the last 50-some years. But if you go back prior to the 1970s, they were taking mail to people who lived in the Manitou Islands.
Wow.
Leland Fishtown, because, if we look at our Google Maps of geography, Glen Arbor and Pyramid Point are a bit closer to the Manitou Islands, but there's no port, there's no docks. No port in Glen Arbor. There once kind of was in Glen Haven, but Frankfurt being too far, Leland is the closest port to the Manitous. So Manitou Island Transit has been literally a lifeline and a source of joy and recreation for so many decades, taking visitors to North and South Manitou in the summer months.
So that's kind of a little bit of a history of it. So what is happening now with the Manitou Transit? I mean, are they still operating? What's going on?
Yeah, so... it's been a mess. There's, essentially a legal battle between Manitou Island Transit and Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which, of course, is a National Park Service, the Department of the Interior. National Lakeshore has been adamant in recent years of, putting in docks to their own specifics. And so because they've been putting in a new dock on North Manitou this year, Manitou Transit has not been able to take people to North Manitou this year. And people visiting North Manitou, there's no, distinct campground, not much in the way of buildings. It's rustic. You go there to rustic camp on your own. You bring in everything in. South Manitou Island does have a campground and more infrastructure, and so South Manitou often has day trippers. But there hasn't been anyone going to North for Manitou Island Transit this year, which has cut into their profits big time. And next year, the national park will be putting in a new dock at South Manitou, which means Manitou Transit won't be able to take people to South Manitou Island next year. And that's as much as, or perhaps more than 2/3 of their profits. So they're sounding the alarm that they may have to, they've even said they might even go out of business.
So I understand, what's with the docks that are being put in? Why can't Manitou Transit use the docks?
Yeah, there's a back and forth, and it's devolved into legal language now. They've said that the docks that the national park wants them to use, the temporary dock on North, is not in a calm enough place
Mm-hmm.
where the boat can't dock calmly and people can't get on and off without danger.
Mm.
So there's a real disagreement logistically and now legally because Manitou Island Transit has sued the federal government to the tune of, I think, $700 million to recoup lost profits. They won a similar lawsuit in 2021 following the peak of COVID when they weren't able to take passengers to the Manitous.
Okay. So what's the long game here, though? I mean, as far as the National Park Service, I would assume that having a ferry partnership between Manitou Island Transit is a good thing. You can get people to the islands. These are part of our national park system. So you theoretically would think that the national parks would want a way to get people there. So what's the holdup?
We would and should assume that. I think it's a safe assumption. I mean, a big part of our national lakeshore and parks everywhere is providing opportunities for recreation. That said, right, I mean, Manitou Transit has said, Jimmy Munoz has said, we might have to go out of business. And there's really nowhere else logistically that you can sail boats out to take people to the Manitous, because Leland is the closest dock. But yeah, certainly in the short term, the long term, there's a lot of questions here. But in the short term, there'll be no public transit to South Manitou next year, which is really going to impact the experience of a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those trade-off situations. I know some of our colleagues in the Leland Undertaker have covered this before as well. And it's, as Jakob was saying, I think there's been, heavy disagreements about the safety of the temporary measures that have been installed. Also, I think from NPS's perspective, they're saying, once these docks are in, we're going to be good to go for years, if not decades. Like, we have to do this. It's going to end years of dredging. It'll improve the island access. But I think, for the transit group, it's just like, is that going to come too late, though? Can they survive this interim period of getting to that place that of potential promised stability? But as Jakob mentioned, just losing so much business. I think is the real challenge to get through.
Because even just shutting off access to one of the islands has been an issue for them. And then, there's not really another use for the ferry at this point, right?
No, not in a way where they can make profits. And to be sure, even in quote unquote normal years when they're running service to the islands, late May or June into mid-September, there are days when they can't go. The lake is the boss.
Yeah.
And when it's moderately wavy in the bay, it's really wavy out there, and they won't go, even if they've booked the ferry.
Yeah, as someone who's camped on South Manitou before, this is part of the adventure. I mean, they run day trips too. A lot of people like to just go out for the day and come
I've done
back
a
to
day
Leland.
trip.
Yes, I have camped for the weekend out there, and that is the chance you take. You sort of know on the back end of your trip, you try to make sure you have a day or two because it is possible you could get stranded at the island for a day or two, not through any fault of the ferries. They're trying to be safe, but that's just a reality of operating a service like that.
How do the park rangers access the island? I mean, obviously they have, maybe some small crafts, but not necessarily large.
I mean, they have their own boats, but I think that they probably also use.
I've definitely seen rangers on the transit.
Yeah,
rangers
for sure they use
will
that
take
too.
the Mishimakwa as well, which is the Manitou Island Transit's boat. But yeah, you're right. You might not get back that same day because the lake is boss. I mean, when I was 9 years old, I took a camping trip with my family to North Manitou, and we got stuck for 2 extra days. And there was an older teenager there who was sharing the Dogman legend to me to scare the heck out of me as the waves didn't abate.
Wow. I mean, but that's what you prepare for too. Like extra food, extra everything, right? I mean, great story. Obviously, you're going to keep us up to date on what's happening, but at this time, what we know right now is that Manitou Transit will not be transporting passengers in 2026 unless something else is done.
Right. I mean, well, you can go to North Manitou next year.
Okay, so it's
you
a
cannot
switch
go to
off.
South Manitou. You cannot go to South Manitou next year. If you want to take a trip to South Manitou Island, do it before they shut down for the season in a few weeks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that story. We're going to take a quick mention here and just a bit of time to talk about our title sponsor, and that is Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. And Labor Day has always been about more than just the end of summer. It's about celebrating the hard work, the skill, the craftsmanship that built this country. And honestly, that's what I love most about Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings here in Traverse City. When you walk through their showroom, you're not just looking at furniture. You are looking at the hands and hearts of American artisans who built it. From dining tables where families gather to sofas that become the backdrop of countless memories, and each piece carries that tradition of quality that Labor Day honors. And right now, Golden-Fowler is celebrating the season with their All-American Labor Day sale. Now through Labor Day, you'll save on handcrafted American furniture in every single department, even custom orders. It's the perfect time to bring home something made with pride, made to last, and made in America. Stop in this week at Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings on Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. Golden-Fowler, furniture you'll love to come home to. And welcome back to Currently. We're going to move along here on our list of things to do. And I know we're switching gears, but this is another kind of headache. The kind of headache that I know that we talk about often. What the heck is going on with 14th Street? And can we just get like the meat and potatoes of why I should be avoiding it for the next several months?
Well, we'll see. No, I don't think it'll take too long. Good. And it sounds like, I would imagine that they will be approaching this in phases. But I think anyone who's driven on 14th Street knows how rough of shape it's in.
Yeah. Oh, it's Road Warrior Mad Max days. Yeah.
It's somewhat apocalyptic, I think is fair to describe. I mean, the city has even acknowledged, the condition is rapidly deteriorating. Mm-hmm. They've seen increased maintenance costs. There's frequent pothole patching from freeze-thaw rain events. They've seen a rise in tire damage claims from the public. So they're aware that 14th Street is not working right now. The challenge that the city has had with that corridor is they have a pot of money that's coming to them in 2028. Over $1 million through the region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, which channels federal funding into local projects. So there is funding awarded for that project. Eventually, 14th Street is going to get a full reconstruction. There's utilities underground that need to be upgraded. There's talks about, potentially realigning Pine Street, having a trail that connects from the Boardman Lake Loop to the village at Grand Traverse Commons. So there's a larger plan and vision for that corridor. Mm-hmm. What you often run into with road projects is if you've got something major like that on the horizon, and we've seen this even with Grandview Parkway before in the past, before it was reconstructed, you sometimes you don't want to spend too much money because you know you got a full reconstruct coming, but you also have to deal with the reality of the condition of the road as it is right now. And right now it needs something. So often you get into these kind of Band-Aid situations that are like, let's try to get it to a place that it can hold on for a couple of years.
Without spending too much money,
knowing that we have to redo the road eventually anyways. So that is what city commissioners approved on Monday this week at their meeting. It's about a $250,000 project. Okay. They had approved the asphalt purchase this week for it. So what they're describing it is a partial mill and fill overlay project. So essentially they're going to be milling off the top 2 inches of asphalt on 14th Street, putting down 2 inches of new asphalt. That'll kind of get the road into a stable, workable condition for the next couple years. Mm-hmm. Until this reconstruct happens. So that is going to be happening on all the driving lanes, both the eastbound and the westbound of 14th between Cass and Maple Streets. They're going to be skipping the Veterans Drive intersection because they just did Veterans Drive recently. Right. That intersection is in good condition, and skipping that will minimize a lot of the traffic disruptions. The project is anticipated to start this fall. They did a section of 14th, so if you drive on it, you will see there's a section that looks like it's newer. Mm-hmm. They were kind of testing out because the city is doing this project in-house, which is different than how they do a lot of street projects. They usually will, hire a team, Elmer's or something like that. So to do it in-house is a kind of a unique interim solution for them. So they tested it out. They felt happy with the results. So this fall, we'll see that project. My guess is they haven't said exactly how detours will work, but my guess is since they have 4 lanes, there'll likely be some combination or 3 lanes in some spots of keeping 1 lane going in each direction while they're working on one side of the road. That
is a very busy street no matter when you're traveling on it. I've noticed that in the last few years. I'm like, wow, 14th. Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends. I mean, some of the corridor is quite narrow and you maybe only have 1 lane in each direction. It is an area that has a lot of neighborhood side streets. So you've got, both on both sides of that, you can kind of get around on Union or, cutting over to Veterans or whatever, or cutting through the neighborhoods. So I'm sure there will be officially designated detours. But yes, We'll likely see a little bit of headache on 14th, but then we'll get through it, and hopefully that'll hold us over for a couple of years until a full reconstruct can happen.
Can I say one of my favorite things about your story here is that you like literally say how many feet? How many linear feet? 6,574 linear feet. This is what a reporter does, people.
You walk it out?
Yeah, I personally walked it out. No, thankfully, city, streets, and engineering are pretty good about sharing those numbers. We do have some number nerds in our readers, so I always like to share that a little bit of information.
I mean, it's interesting to note because it maybe feels like a small section, but that's a large section.
Yeah. So a little bit of a repair work coming to 14th,
and we have another story about some DDA updates too. So why don't we dive right into the DDA?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that the DDA talked about at their meeting this past Friday was Rotary Square. We've talked about Rotary Square on the show. The DDA is going through a process right now to create a new community vision for that square, which is at the corner of State and Union Streets. They're getting very close to getting a final design ready for that. So that is likely to be unveiled this fall. And that will kind of be like, here are the amenities, here's kind of the layout that we want in this park, and we'll be working towards improvements. What they wanted in the meantime, as they head to that design process, was also to create a policy for how people can reserve or rent or use the park.
I mean, the parks policies has been a big conversation at several different city parks for many, many years, right?
Yeah, we had a separate story last week that folks can check out. That's about a larger discussion about parks, about how much fees are charged to events using the open space, maybe potentially letting food trucks onto more city park properties like Bryant Park or the beach. So there's a whole separate conversation going about parks in general, but this is really one specific park, and this park is unique because the DDA owns this property. They're the ones that are kind of managing it. It's not a city park, it's a DDA park. So they essentially came up with a policy that said, going forward, because they've had so many people asking to use the park for everything from political rallies to, maybe live entertainment. TC Phil has performed there. Most of those events will need a permit going forward. There's a flat fee proposed of $250 per day. There is the right of the DDA to waive that. Maybe perhaps if it's a certain kind of nonprofit or something that's low impact, they could waive that fee. The notable exception or focus of this policy, I think it's worth mentioning, is that they decided that they do not want events in that park that will charge admission.
Oh, very interesting.
Which is different than the open space or some of the big parks that get rented and you have a ticketed concert for the Cherry Festival or TC Food and Wine, which is happening this weekend. They really felt strongly that it's meant to be a civic square. People are meant to be able to pass through it, to have a lunch break, to sit on a bench. They did not want it to become, reserved day after day for private events where you couldn't pay to get in.
Right.
So they will allow some elements in the park of fundraising or selling, like they might allow alcohol or food sales for something, or if you have carnival games and you're just charging a couple tickets for the carnival games. But the event itself must be free to the public.
Yeah, I mean, carnival games, that sounds fantastic.
Your old-fashioned dunk tank or whatnot.
You know how I love that. I just want a summer-long carnival happening every day.
Yeah, so...
Travis City's not that already?
Well put, yeah. Well said, touche. I love it. So anything else with the DDA? Any other updates?
I mean, the last one I'll mention, because this was also overlapped with the city commission, it was a DDA and kind of city commission issue, is the city has been trying to get to a TIF implementation policy. So we know last year the voters changed the city charter to say that if there's any kind of new TIF plan, an extension, an amendment, it has to go to a public vote. And that's DDA plans, that's brownfield plans, any kind of TIF plan. So ever since that election last year, the city has been trying to put together a policy that details how that process will work.
Right.
So if someone wants to put a TIF plan to voters, do they have to go to the city commission first and then to the voters? What is the language that goes on the ballot? You want to make sure that that language is consistent from each proposal to each proposal so that it's not biased. You have to follow certain election laws. So they've been trying to get to this policy. There has been so much debate over this policy that it has gotten repeatedly delayed. And that happened again this week. The board unanimously turned down the latest draft of the TIF amendment. There were too many questions that they had. They're trying to figure out the order of going to commissioners or voters, especially can commissioners turn it down before it even goes to voters?
Oh.
How many times can a proposal go forward? That's the same TIF proposal. So lots of outstanding questions there. I think that's something to keep an eye on only because I think once a policy is in place, we will eventually see the DDA circle back to this idea of extending TIF 97, which is one of the main funding mechanisms for downtown. It's been the source of a lot of controversy. And they're kind of waiting for this policy to get put in place to figure out how to move forward with that.
It's been a while.
There's got to be almost a year.
People have to be pretty frustrated.
I think on the DDA's part, at least some DDA board members last week expressed frustration with that. I mean, commissioners, I would imagine, are probably frustrated themselves. Sure. They don't like to, necessarily have to spend all this time on one issue. They, I think, would like to get a policy in place. But I think they're also trying to make sure that it's right and that it's tight legally when they get it into place.
Yeah. All right. Well said. Well, we have 2 more stories to share. But right now, we're going to also share some information about one of our sponsors, and that is West Shore Bank. Now, like a lot of you, I've always got a few goals I'm working on. For me, that might look like saving for a little getaway or a big getaway, maybe a trip, setting aside some money for an unexpected, expense, or even tackling a home project because, everybody has home projects, right? That's why I really like what West Shore Bank is doing. They've launched this new savings center inside their WSB Touch app, and it makes saving money actually feel doable. You can set your own goals, things like vacation, new car, rainy day fund, carnival all summer long. Then you can automate your transfers so the money moves over without you even thinking about it. So you don't see the money. So then you don't have to worry about putting it in there, right? They even let you round up your purchases so the spare change goes straight into savings. It's all about staying on track and feeling more in control of your money. And honestly, who doesn't need that? The best part is it's local. You're not talking about some big corporate bank. You're working with people who live and work right here in our community. So if you've got goals, baby, big or small, check out the Savings Center in the WSB West Shore Bank Touch app from West Shore Bank, or stop by and see them on 8th Street. West Shore Bank, saving made simple right here at home. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. And we are back. We're going to move into a story that is always, this is just an event that is classic Northern Michigan. We go every year. Yes. We're going again this year.
Yep.
It is polka time, baby.
What night are you going?
We're going to go Thursday. So, people, that was last night.
Yeah, for people watching, that would have been last night.
It would have been last night if you're listening.
So you were poking?
I was poking. I hope I didn't poke my eyes out. Hey-o. So you have a wonderful story in the Glen Arbor Sun that really kind of outlines the tradition, the 43-year tradition of Polka Fest. Some things that I didn't know. I didn't know that this is one of the only continuously, it's one of the only Polka Fests still in operation in the country. So tell us more about Polka Fest.
It's fun. It used to be, it happened for a time in June, and then also it happened for a time during the July 4th rush.
Yeah.
I think that a number of years ago, Cedar Chamber and the kind of the great minds of Cedar moved it back to August. So it's competing with less, but it's wonderful. It's fun. I think it's everything to everybody. I will probably take my kids at some point, probably for some daytime fun. And there are clowns and there are games and there's of course beer and sausage and pierogies and there's late night action, which I don't know if I'll get to this year, but I've done that when I was younger. And it's great dancing, right?
Yeah.
It's this huge dance floor, everyone, multiple generations dancing. Sonny and Bernie, this great old couple, they're dancing for hours and hours and hours. It would put most of us down on the ground.
They're really good.
They're really good.
There are some really, really good polka dancers out there. I am not one of them. I can kind of shuffle, shimmy.
Yeah.
It almost looks like I'm just a little bit old and I'm moving
the polka
slowly.
step is easy enough where you feel like you do
correct.
it, but still.
It's one of those things that even if you're not comfortable on the dance floor, which I need several pitchers of beer to get into.
Which you can get.
But it's true at Polka Fest. Everyone just sort of feels like you can, and you see such a mix of people on the dance floor. Yeah. It's really fun. It's a very non-judgmental, just everyone kind of move around the dance floor and you'll find.
The bands are spectacular every year. They have just gotten so good and the music never stops. It's like one band, it just goes quiet for a bit, takes a break. Another band just like lights up the stage right away. It's so fun. I have to share this. We have a mutual friend, Ben Whiting. And when he he went to Polka Fest last year, I believe, and he bought every single piece of merch that the band had.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he still talks about that band to this day. He's like, when are they playing? I love this band. He was wearing their t-shirt. He was wearing a hat. I don't know. He had like a scarf on. It was amazing.
That's cool.
So shout out to Ben because he is the merch lover. So yeah.
And the other thing I have to, plug about it, which the Glen Arbor Sun talked about in their story as well, but it's just such a nice service if you are thinking you might indulge and have a couple pitchers of beer and don't want to worry about driving
Absolutely.
or just don't want to deal with the traffic and out in Cedar, which can get a little crazy at certain times of the Polka Fest. There's a free shuttle system from Traverse City through Beta. So they leave on the hour starting at 5 o'clock from the Meyer parking lot. We took it last year.
We use it every year.
It was fun. It's very efficient. It was on time. It was a nice casual way to just catch up with friends on the bus. And then, you could drive, you're not having to worry about driving. You're being safe. And it runs very late. I think the last one leaves at 11:30 at night. So I highly recommend that service.
Yeah, for anyone who's going to indulge should be getting a driver.
Yeah.
I mean, late night drinking and public transit. This is not something that we normally talk about in Northern Michigan, but this is a win.
Yes,
It's a
because we don't
huge
always
win.
have that option, and it's a great one.
So Polka Fest still happening. You can check it out actually Friday. That's today and tomorrow. Is there anything going on Sunday at all? Or is it just?
Let's see.
I think it's through Sunday.
Through Sunday.
I think it does have.
Yeah,
I
because
think it
they
does
do
go.
the polka mass,
There's
which is
a
also
mass,
amazing.
a traditional Catholic mass. Because what's great too is that Cedar is this really authentic, wonderful Polish community, going back for many, 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 many generations. Some of the first white settlers who came to Cedar, which means you can still get authentic Polish food in Cedar throughout the year. But yeah, the mass.
They have ultimate air dogs on Sunday.
What?
Yeah, there's a cornhole tournament, bingo. So yeah, there's still
Tons of
going
stuff to
on
do
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are things for everyone, whether you want to drink till 11:30 or play bags, whatever.
I love that. That's fantastic. And shout out to the Polish Heritage Center in Cedar too. I mean that you can check it out all year long. You don't have to wait for Polka Fest. So
Yeah.
very, very cool. We are going to really shift gears here and get into a story that you published, Beth, on Wednesday. So it's been a couple of days at this point. This is something that I'm just going to let our listeners and our viewers know that we are going to be talking about a story that includes sexual assault. And so if you're sensitive to things like that, I just want to give you a warning. Your story was amazing. It was so well written. You could definitely hear, not only the information and the facts of Samantha Stites and her harrowing experience, but you could feel like at times maybe the message that she was trying to get across. So why don't you take us through being able to interview Sam? Give us a little bit about not only her experience, but also how she's sharing that with the world right now.
Yeah. So Samantha Stites is an Elk Rapids native. So she's from our area. She went to Grand Valley State University, and that is where in 2011 she met Christopher Thomas. He was several years older than her, kind of a socially awkward guy. I think it's a situation that unfortunately a lot of women can relate to, where she, I think felt sorry for him because he was a little bit of a loner, seemed a little bit awkward, that she was, trying to be nice to him, kind to him, include him in activities. And I think he kind of lashed onto that and took that the wrong way.
Very.
Became quite obsessed with her, would show up at her workplace with flowers, followed her home from college to her hometown in Elk Rapids, applied for the same out-of-state internship. And she repeatedly expressed to him that she was uncomfortable, did not want him contacting him, or did not want him, asked him to leave alone, was very clear about that. And he continued to contact her. So she filed for a personal protection order, a PPO, in Antrim County in 2014. The judge said it was one of the most severe stalking cases he's seen. He was very worried about her safety, and he gave her the longest PPO he had ever granted, which was for 6 years.
6 years.
So she had a PPO in place against Christopher Thomas until 2020. And he seemed to relatively obey that. There's probably some evidence that he might have been using a false social media account to follow her and still kind of keep an eye on her, but he did not approach her. He did not talk to her. So she had this period of relative peace while this PPO was in place. When it expired in 2020, she soon began seeing him everywhere. He was coming to her gym in Traverse City. She would run into him at the grocery store. He started showing up at her weekly soccer games. And her and her friends were alarmed. I mean, obviously the frequency that they were seeing him, and because she had this history with him, she was being very nervous. He wasn't approaching her or talking to her, but he was just always in her vicinity, always there. And they were very baffled about how he always seemed to know where she was. They would go to a bar, he would be there. They would move and go to another place, he would be there. Detectives later found out that he had hit a tracker on her car, which is how, and trackers also on one or two of her friends' cars.
Oh my gosh.
So that's how he knew where the location was. But eventually the frequency, she, at first was concerned, but giving him space because he wasn't confronting her or speaking to her.
Because he was there, but he wasn't interacting with her.
Right. But obviously an unsettling presence to have someone
Absolutely.
always there. Friends of hers had confronted him at various times and said, we know you're following her. Like, you need to stop this behavior. And he would say, I don't know what you're talking about. So she sought another PPO in 2022 in Grand Traverse County eventually because the escalating actions were worrying her. That request was rejected. Judge Kevin Elsenheimer rejected the request. It sounds like from what we've, heard from court documents and from the series that we'll talk about in a second about this, that it may have been a referee who first looked at this PPO request and made a recommendation to Judge Elsenheimer that he kind of rubber stamped, not understanding the dangerous history between
or the 6-year previous PPO
or the previous PPO. It seems like that had not been fully reviewed by the court when the rejection was made. They just said there seemed to be a complicated relationship between the two of them, which obviously was upsetting to her. She would not characterize it that way. There's not a relationship there. They later said that she hadn't given them specific facts to show that the PPO should have been issued. They offered her a hearing. But she was afraid of going to it because she was afraid Christopher would be there or become angry. What is important to know is when the PPO was denied, he was aware of that. He, in fact, went to the courthouse and asked if a PPO had been sought against him. And when he realized one was not in place, the receipts show that was right around the time he began constructing this soundproof bunker.
So is that normal practice that anyone can walk into the courthouse and say, has anyone filed a PPO against me?
No. And she said she had, in fact, been worried about that happening and had asked the clerk at the courthouse, can he come in and ask if I have filed for this PPO? And they told her no. So she felt betrayed by that, that information was shared with him. He built this soundproof bunker in a storage unit in Blair Township.
So receipts show that right after he realized he didn't have any sort of PPO against, because he tracked her car,
right,
knew that she had gone to the courthouse.
Yes, followed her to the courthouse.
Right.
Yes.
Went in, said, did anybody, do anything? And then went to Menards and started buying materials.
Correct. So he built this bunker in a storage unit in October 7th, 2022. So a couple months after the PPO was rejected, he entered her home in the early morning hours. He bound and gagged her, kidnapped her, took her and her dog to the storage unit. He told her he was planning to hold her there for multiple weeks. He said when she pointed out that people would be looking for her that he had taken her paddleboard and would leave it on Lake Michigan to make it look like she had drowned.
Oh my gosh.
Potentially divert attention away from looking for her. I think this is important to know. He talked about being inspired by the Netflix show You, which is a very popular series about kind of an obsessive serial killer who stalks and traps women in a cage. And we had a separate conversation, Samantha and I didn't get into the story much, but I think it's important to talk about is that, these kind of popularity of crime shows, especially fictional crime shows, there's plus and minuses. Sometimes they can teach people things, survival tactics, especially true crime shows sometimes. The flip side of it is it can romanticize or glamorize behavior. And in this case, he saw someone on a popular show who was a handsome lead actor who was trapping women and making them fall in love with him. And he thought, this is something I could do. So there's a dark side to those shows, I think, as well. She has a background in social work. She drew on that training to try to stay calm, to try to reason with him. She knew he was in love with her. She thought maybe he won't hurt me if I can kind of get myself through the situation. She eventually agreed, obviously under duress, to sleep with him on the condition that he would release her, which he eventually did. She went right to Munson and had to undergo a very detailed forensic exam, which is not fun for anyone who's had to go through a SANE exam, detective interviews, and he was arrested. He had tried to play innocent at first. He called it role-playing that went too far. But he was facing many, many charges, eventually got to a plea deal, and then was sentenced in February 2024. And I think the thing that's notable about this case is the same judge who denied her PPO, Elsenheimer, was the one who sentenced Christopher Thomas. And we don't know because judges don't typically comment on their cases. He hasn't in this one. But it's potential to wonder if he might have had some remorse about the PPO situation.
Yeah.
He did talk about his risk, Christopher Thomas's risk to other people. He had a previous stalking case. Elsenheimer went beyond the sentencing guidelines and sentenced him to 40 to 60 years in prison. He was 39 at the time, so it's effectively a life sentence.
So he had been charged and convicted of a previous stalking case.
Yes.
Prior to stalking Samantha.
Yes.
He was given one of the longest PPOs in northern Michigan history of 6 years. And none of this was really taken into account when his second PPO was denied?
It appears not. Now, I will say that 13th Circuit Court changed their policy after Samantha Stites' case. They now require referees, who are sometimes, again, these sort of screening agents for the judges of PPO orders. They are now required to obtain and look at any prior PPOs before making a recommendation to the court, which seems straightforward, but that was not a policy that was in place before.
So moving forward, I mean, obviously she was able to survive this just horrific event. And she is not without scars. Clearly, this is going to cause PTSD. She has been, very forthright in needing to take medications, therapy. She moved. She said in your story that not all victims survive crimes like these, but I never want to worry about him hurting me or another woman again. That's something that she said to the judge. And she even took it a step further, though, in sharing this very publicly. And that's not something that victims often do. And, one of the things that I think is really important to note is that we don't often disclose the identities of victims in any sort of case.
Right.
And this case, her identity was not disclosed, but she chose to come forward in the hope of helping others not only understand some of the system's failures that clearly failed her, but also how, people can move forward and the importance of, to be quite honest, of believing people when they say that something is off.
Yeah, and the reason that we're talking about this story now, I mean, the sentencing was in February of last year, so, we're about, 18 months later. The reason we're talking about now is because she is not only sharing her story, but sharing it in a pretty prominent way. So her story is the subject of a 3-part Hulu series called Stalking Samantha, 13 Years of Terror. It came out Tuesday on Hulu this week. It's on the homepage of Hulu if you go right now, so it's prominently featured on the streaming platform. I know a lot of people have seen it already. If you're from northern Michigan, you would recognize there's numerous Elk Rapids and Traverse City locations. Yes. Members of the court, the sheriff's office are speaking to the camera. There's reenactment scenes that were filmed here locally. And so she really said, she told me she didn't want to be a zoo animal. She didn't want it to be sensationalized. She did it because she felt the production company she was working with shared her goals of doing something that might be beneficial and help promote social change, really wanting victims to have less shame to be able to share their stories, especially stalking I have covered our stalking cases before. It does tend to be a crime that often can go for a long period of time without being properly addressed, without maybe being taken as seriously, or with victims being told there's not much they can do. And it really destabilizes someone's sense of safety and entire life, where they're always having to look over their shoulders. And as we've seen in this case, it can often escalate into much more serious behavior. She also said she wanted to honor people who have been a victim of crimes like this who haven't survived. So just this week alone, she's been on Good Morning America. She's been on People. She's been on ABC News to talk about this. I know a lot of people are watching the Hulu series. She has an initiative that she's launched for victims that's called Beekeepers Advocacy. So she's working on that. And we did end the story by just saying, I think this is an important note to end on, that there's a larger conversation here about mental health. She's a trained therapist. She talked about even having her experience as a trained therapist, it was difficult for her to navigate the system after her assault and get the support that she needed. It was hard to access disability benefits. It was hard for her to find the right therapist. And she knew the system. So she's like, I know how hard it is for people outside the system to get through it. So that's a big thing I think she's advocating for. And the other thing is just this mental health services in general. And we talked about the recent Walmart attack, which you and I did almost a whole show about. But we talked about that too, of another example where we need these services not just for victims, but obviously for perpetrators. Perhaps if someone could have intervened in Christopher Thomas's life earlier and got him adequate treatment. His parents even talk in the series about wishing that they could have done something to help him. Now, there's a how much someone's willing to be helped is a factor at play too.
Absolutely.
But making sure the resources are there if people want to get help or families need help for someone that they're worried about, being able to red flag someone, taking PPOs and stalking seriously. These are all issues that she's working on. She did talk about, we have a new mental health center in Traverse City. She said, I think there's better options in Traverse City, but there's just more that could be done.
And on that note, this is an individual who had a record, who had a previous experience with this. And at any point, maybe more intervention could have, helped.
Right. Because clearly it was obvious from his behavior fairly early on. I mean, almost a decade ago, that he wasn't being rehabilitated, that his first conviction was not enough to stop him. And he was continuing to indulge in the same behavior. So yeah, that was the main takeaway from the story is better protections, taking victims more seriously, listening to people up front to try to avoid a crime in the first place, but also better health support, mental health support for people who, like Christopher, who are struggling to maybe try to divert someone who might become a perpetrator from going down that path.
Well, really well done with that story. And I watched the first 2 episodes on Hulu, and I encourage everyone to do so. It is eye-opening, it's chilling, but I think it's necessary. I think it's important, even if this is something that is, out of your comfort zone, to not only understand, but understand that it does happen, and it happens here, and it happens often.
Right in our own backyard.
In our own backyard. Well, thank you so much, Beth. And thank you, Jakob, for another great show. Before we go, I do want to ask you both, as we do every week, is there anything that you're looking forward to this week? There's a lot going on. We mentioned Polka Fest. It's on my list. How about you, Jakob? Anything you're looking forward to? Or maybe you're just going, hey, I'm going to sit at home and enjoy the rest of summer.
Yeah. First off, Beth, thanks for your report. This is so important.
Thank you.
What am I looking forward to? I mean, just more swims. Right?
Yeah.
More swims before the fall comes.
More swims before it's ice.
Yeah. Well, we can.
Yes, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. How about you, Beth?
Definitely Polka Fest. And I mean, this weekend there's so many great kind of food type events going on, but TC Food and Wine is huge event happening starting Thursday. So by the time the show airs Friday, it'll have already kicked off. I think there's even an opening party tonight when we're taping Wednesday night. But I'm going to multiple events, TC Food and Wine, including 2 National Writer Series events, including Anthony from Queer Eye. I'm very excited about
He's your
that.
fave.
I love him. And they're also doing a panel about reality, food and cooking stars, about the behind the scenes of that. So
I'm so interested in that.
Yeah, me too.
Because it
I love Top Chef.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it gets really nasty.
Yeah. So that'll be fun.
Yes, I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to the grand tasting event on Saturday. So I'll be there in the open space. I think there'll be a tent. I don't know. Sunshine, hopefully. And lots of things to nibble on and lots of samples. And there's some wine and all sorts of good stuff there. If you want any more information, just go to traversity.com for that. And with that, once again, thank you both so much for another great show. We're going to be back next Friday with journalist and first-time currently guest Marty Link, who's going to be joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all the platforms. It's at crystalfrost.com. Easy to do. Follow us on social media. We are everywhere. Subscribe to Currently with Christal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch the full show right here on YouTube and Facebook if you're watching. Currently is a Compass local podcast. It's produced by Pancake Boy Productions in Traverse City, Michigan. Big thanks to our lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, and the wonderful West Shore Bank, plus the Coin Slot. And speaking of the Coin Slot, they have live music high atop the parking lot bar stage every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday through August. Now, these are incredible bands like Protea, Sam, I think it's called Gukwa, and Dirt Room. Have you heard of these folks?
I've heard a couple of these folks. Yeah.
Fresh Coast Groove and a band called the Neighborhood Dogs. It's live. It's local music. I think it's the most live and local place in Traverse City. So get to the coin slot. Thank you so much, friends, for being here. We will see you next Friday.